at the Jung Manor under the stars. An elf was checking the health of a newborn baby. After finishing the long process, the elf sighed, and another man asked what the outcome was. The physician answered that because of the child's constitution, he would likely not live past the age of 20. The leader of the manor said that this was a curse, since the child's mother had died during childbirth. The elf got annoyed and can't believe he's asking that to a physician. He then asked how the patriarch could say such a thing about his own child, who was already expected to die young. The elf added that the child's condition was similar to the 9 severed meridians, although he had never seen someone whose manhwa acupoint was so extremely wide open. The patriarch asked if the physician meant the pressure point on the top of the head. The physician confirmed it, explaining that if the manhwa acupoint opens, the person dies soon after, which is an event sometimes called deity ascension. Patriarch Jung said he had heard that powerful Taoists do this when they leave the mortal world for their heavenly realm. The physician scoffed and asked if he believed in such nonsense. The manhwa acupoint is used by absolute martial masters when they use their upper meridian. Deity ascension occurs when someone gets too drunk on the energy of the great nature and dies because they cannot handle it. The patriarch stared at the child for a moment, then rose, turned his back towards them, and declared that he understood it was heavenly punishment for killing his mother. "How can you call yourself a father?" the physician asked. The patriarch responded that it was time for the physician to leave, and the chief steward would pay him on his way out. The physician shouted that he didn't need their money and stormed out. On his way out of the Jung Manor, he thought that if the child had been born somewhere else, he might have become the most respected martial master, but instead he was born into a family that despised him. The child would likely die young in the countryside unless he achieved enlightenment on his own. More than a decade later, at the Jung Manor, the patriarch declared that since the foundation of the clan by his late father, he had dedicated his life to making the Jung Manor one of the greatest. His goal was to make the clan famous worldwide, and he was pleased to see that one of his sons had followed in his grandfather's footsteps and managed to join the Jungnon sect. Everyone congratulated their sibling for achieving such an incredible feat. Patriarch Jung proposed a toast to celebrate this great moment in the history of the clan. The eldest brother noticed that the chair reserved for their youngest sibling was empty and asked his father why Yeonshin was not joining them. The patriarch replied that the youngest was at the training ground, as instructed. The eldest protested, but the patriarch insisted that it be this way because Yeonshin brought only ill omens. The eldest brother was frustrated, but there was nothing he could do. At the training grounds, while everyone else was celebrating, Yeonshin, the youngest sibling of the Jung Manor, was training alone. He had always trained by himself and used whatever materials he could find. This time, he had completely mastered the Jung clan's movement art. With this art, he could stimulate his muscles with energy, and by compressing it, his body would become significantly stronger. He wondered if his lifespan would improve now that his body was stronger. He remembered the time when he told his older brother that he had created a martial art. He had redeveloped the exclusive martial art of the clan. His brother told him not to share it with anyone. Yeonshin couldn't understand why, since he hadn't done anything wrong, and also told his other brother, who refused to try it because he feared energy deviation and death from a martial art created by a child. His father scolded him for meddling with the clan's exclusive martial arts, reminding him that he was just a child, not a clan founder. A clan founder is someone who creates martial art and a founder of a martial group. Yeonshin never thought of himself as such and never considered creating martial arts. He just wanted to be healthy and live happily with his family. Everyone was talking about someone's arrival and rushing to greet them. Yeonshin wondered where everyone was going and remembered that today was the day a martial master from the Jungnon sect was arriving. The Jungnon sect is one of the 9 great sects, and it is considered the strongest in the Shaanxi region, alongside the manhwa sect. Yeonshin also wanted to meet the master in person, but his father had ordered him not to show his face in front of the guests. The order wasn't given directly but through someone else, so Yeonshin couldn't understand why. He knew his father hated him because his mother died during his birth, so this was another way to keep him away from clan affairs. He decided to go, though, and watch the master from afar. The people were discussing which master had come to visit. They hoped it was someone important so their clan could enjoy the honor of being acknowledged by such a master. Someone announced that the martial masters of the Jungnon sect had arrived, and through the gate walked a woman accompanied by them. Everyone was surprised to see her. She was no ordinary woman. She was part of the noble race beings who could live forever and were even considered deities by some. Yeonshin was amazed to see one in real life, as he had only read about them. The core energy that is usually condensed inside the body was exuded from her body naturally. The patriarch was taken aback by the presence of such an important guest. He declared that her visit greatly honored them and their humble clan. He then introduced himself as the patriarch of the Jung Manor. She introduced herself as Yeonshin, an elder of the Jungnon sect, and thanked them for their hospitality. The patriarch was shocked to have a noble race elder of the Jungnon sect as a guest and apologized for not properly receiving her as a deity. She told them to raise their heads, as such treatment was unnecessary. Patriarch Jung apologized again for keeping her outside after a long journey and invited her in. As the guests were escorted inside, Yeonshin wondered how long this woman had lived. As Yeonshin began to follow the patriarch, she felt a strong gaze and turned, her eyes meeting Yeonshin's. Surprised by the direct eye contact, he quickly bowed his head in a hasty greeting. Noticing her pause, the patriarch turned and explained that the boy was his third son. Yeonshin remarked that he had very bright eyes and looked intelligent. The patriarch let out a nervous laugh, apologizing and claiming his third son was not well-mannered. When she asked what he meant, he replied with embarrassment that the boy was a troublemaker. Yeonshin turned and headed back to the training grounds. He thought that seeing her energy had given him a new perspective. Having mastered his clan's arts, he had reached a plateau and was unsure of his next step. He unsheathed his blade, looking at its reflection. He decided it would be good to try training with swords. As night fell, one of Yeonshin's servants remarked that the manor was better than they had expected. With so much earth energy in the area, the servant noted the tyrant sword tribe would surely want the land. Yeonshin agreed that their arrival was certain. She mused that they could plan a counterattack, but it would inevitably result in the sacrifice of the entire Jung clan. Her servants asked why they couldn't just attack the tribe before they reached the manor. She wished it were so simple but explained that within the tyrant sword tribe were the 13 skies, individuals who were each monstrously strong. She warned her retinue not to let their guard down and to keep their swords sharp. Taking a sip of tea, her thoughts drifted back to Yeonshin. She found it strange how clearly he stood out from the others. Meanwhile, a blue aura emanated from the training hall where Yeonshin was deep in meditation. He felt his Baihui acupoint pulsing at the top of his head and wondered why it felt so open. Though he hadn't been able to meditate for a year while focusing on physical training, the amount of energy flowing through his head was now even greater than before. He calculated that at this rate, he had less than 5 years before the energy overwhelmed him, leading to a vegetative state and then death. A genuine terror ran down his spine. He opened the training hall door and walked outside, looking up at the moon. He lamented that even after completely mastering his clan's arts, he could not stop his body's decay. Suddenly, a new sensation shattered his dark thoughts. An ominous energy was flowing from the other side of the manor wall. He glared in that direction, grabbing his blade and running toward the feeling. Something was wrong. The closer he got, the stronger the scent of blood became. It was too quiet. When he reached the main building, he saw an orange barrier shimmering over the door. He recognized it as a trap formation and pushed through it without hesitation. He stopped dead, stunned by the sight before him. All of the clan's practitioners and servants were dead, their bodies strewn across the floor in a brutal tableau of slaughter. He expressed his disbelief that he hadn't sensed it, realizing the formation had masked the massacre. He knelt by a servant whose face was frozen in fear, tears still wet on her cheeks, and gently closed her eyes. He wondered if the culprits were truly that much stronger than everyone else in his clan. A voice from the shadows expressed surprise that someone was still alive. Another voice called the survivor a fool, saying he should have stayed hidden instead of crawling out. A group of men with red hair, led by a bald man, stepped into the light. One decided the boy was simply unlucky and that they should send him to the afterlife. Yeonshin looked up at them, his face a calm mask. The bald man stepped forward, stating that he was only killing Yeonshin because he was ordered to, telling him not to blame him for it. He began to concentrate his aura into his palm for a strike, but Yeonshin gave him no time to complete it. As the bald man lunged, Yeonshin sidestepped and grabbed the back of the man's attacking arm. The man's eyes widened in realization as Yeonshin, with pure strength alone, crushed the bones in his limb, twisting it at an unnatural angle. A horrifying scream tore through the silence as the man dropped to the floor, clutching his mangled arm. Yeonshin's expression did not change. The other intruders looked on in alarm. Seeing their comrade writhing in agony, they sweated nervously and unsheathed their blades. One of them demanded to know who he was. Yeonshin raised his sword. He identified himself as the third son of the clan. Bluish lightning crackling from his feet, Yeonshin walked slowly toward the remaining intruders. The bald man, having staggered to his feet, screamed a curse at him and lunged forward, striking with his good hand. Before the man could process what was happening, Yeonshin's body tilted sideways in a blur of motion and his blade flashed, neatly separating the man's head from his shoulders. The other red-haired men were shocked by the speed of his draw, but Yeonshin gave them no time to recover. He unleashed an ability called the Scripture of Origin, and another head flew from its body. One of the men screamed in terror instead of attacking. Capitalizing on the hesitation, Yeonshin cut him diagonally in half. He then charged the final two. One raised his blade only to lose his arm. The other lost his head. Yeonshin turned back to the disarmed man and thrust his sword forward, impaling him through the chest. The man stared at the blade piercing his body in fear, but Yeonshin's expression was one of cold anger. He pulled the sword free, and as he did, the blood from all the fresh corpses seemed to leap into the air. The intruders dropped to the floor in near-perfect unison. Their lives extinguished too quickly for them to even react. Yeonshin walked back toward the bodies of his clan's servants and let out a sigh. He mused that while this was his first time using what he called the delightful sword, he now understood how it worked. A voice from the gate commented that his display was quite impressive. Yeonshin looked over, confused, as a new group walked into the courtyard. The speaker, a man with a bandana, qualified his praise, stating that it was not much to write home about. He asserted that Yeonshin's opponents were idiots who had only lost because they let their guard down. Yeonshin wondered about the newcomers, noticing they wore a different uniform. The man continued, expressing some surprise at how skilled Yeonshin was for his age, and asked if he had trained with that sword his entire life. Yeonshin ignored the question and instead asked if they were from the Blood Flame cult. The man confirmed they were not, explaining that the men Yeonshin had just killed were from that cult. He identified his own group as the Tyrant Sword Tribe. Yeonshin was stunned. He knew the Blood Flame cult and the Tyrant Sword Tribe were both factions of the 13 Skies, said to be the most powerful and cruel groups in all of Murim. He found it hard to believe that two such organizations would be at his family's manor at the same time. He asked what business they could possibly have there. The man with the bandana told him it was none of his business. A small smirk touched Yeonshin's lips. He reasoned that since they were answering his questions instead of attacking, they might already know something about him. The bandana wearer saw his expression and asked what he meant. Yeonshin decided to bluff, asking if they knew his family was part of the Desolate Fortress, the most powerful branch sect in Murim. He warned that killing him would bring them significant trouble, even for the likes of the Tyrant Sword Tribe. Before they could respond, a massive explosion tore through the manor wall. A body flew through the air, and Yeonshin recognized him as one of the men from the Jongnon sect. The assistant spat up a mouthful of blood as he landed. Yeonshin looked up to see Yeonshin herself flying through the air, dodging an unseen attack. She glanced down at him as she regained her footing, clearly in pain and using her sword to stay upright. Blood trickled from her ear. Yeonshin reasoned that if a sword deity like her was in such a pitiful state, her enemy must be incredibly powerful. A figure appeared on the other side of the broken wall, and a chill ran down Yeonshin's spine as the man levitated over it. He slowly descended, a dark purple aura of pure death energy radiating from him as he walked forward. Yeonshin wondered who this man could be, as he seemed to be the human embodiment of death itself. The man's gaze fell upon Yeonshin, and the brief eye contact made his head feel light. Instantly, the man with the bandana and the other members of the Tyrant Sword tribe dropped to their knees, greeting their tribe leader. Yeonshin couldn't believe it. The leader of the Tyrant Sword tribe, a man considered a harbinger of disaster and an equal to the patriarch of a great sect, was here. He glanced between the tribe leader and the heavily injured Yeonshin. He assessed the situation and concluded that, at this rate, they were as good as dead. Letting out a long sigh, he decided that if he was going to die anyway, he might as well test his limits. He stomped the ground, shattering the stone as he charged forward with explosive speed. The man with the bandana was caught completely off guard. Yeonshin readied his blade as the man fumbled to unsheath his own, but he was far too slow. Yeonshin thrust his sword through the man's chest before he could even react. Throughout the exchange, both Yeonshin and the tyrant tribe leader simply watched. Yeonshin let the corpse slide from his blade. He then looked directly at the tribe leader and challenged him, asking if he thought he was incapable of killing him, even after such a blatant act of defiance. The remaining tribe members drew their blades and cursed Yeonshin, but the tribe leader held up a hand. He commanded them to stop, stating that the boy's spirit was better than all of theirs combined. Everyone, including Yeonshin, was taken aback. The tribe leader's men realized the situation was serious if their master was praising an enemy. The leader announced that he would let Yeonshin live. Yeonshin countered that it was more a matter of the leader being unable to kill him. He reached down and pulled his blade from the corpse, revealing his trump card. He stated it was because the leader knew he was the only grandson of the former Divine Sword Squad leader and current head of the Desolate Fortress. Yeonshin was surprised to learn of Yeonshin's lineage. The tribe leader conceded that getting involved with the Desolate Fortress was indeed a bad idea. He clarified, however, that this was not his reason for sparing him. He simply liked the boy's spirit, adding that if Yeonshin had no connections to the fortress, he would have taken him on as his own disciple. The high praise shocked his men and Yeonshin once more. The tribe leader raised his sword and stabbed it into the ground. He gave Yeonshin 1 day to leave the manor, declaring that he would not permit any other sects or clans to set foot on this land from now on. He began to walk away, then stopped and turned back one last time. He told Yeonshin that he would always be open to a duel and that the boy should seek him out when he was ready for revenge. Even as the man and his tribe exited the manor, Yeonshin continued to stare with cold defiance. He committed the image of the man's departing back to memory, a new target for him to chase. With the battle over, Yeonshin finally made his way inside the ravaged manor hall. He looked down at his father, who was on the floor struggling to breathe. Yeonshin knelt, announcing his presence. His father stretched a trembling hand toward him, his voice a ragged whisper as he asked how his son had lived and grown so strong. Yeonshin explained that it was due to the movement art he had created and mastered. His father's eyes widened in surprise, recalling the time Yeonshin had tried to tell him about it, only to be harshly admonished. He asked if it was the same art from back then. Yeonshin confirmed that it was. A look of profound regret crossed the patriarch's face. He declared it a sacred art of the Jung clan, and tears began to flow. He lamented his ignorance and foolishness, realizing he had completely overlooked the fact that his own third son had the genius to create such a thing. He tightened his grip on Yeonshin's hand and told him that he definitely possessed the qualities of a founder. As tears rolled down his face, Yeonshin looked down at him with sorrowful eyes. His father's gaze began to lose focus, his final words acknowledging the truth he had denied for so long. He whispered, his son. Then his eyes closed for the last time. As Yeonshin's brother began to scream for their father, Yeonshin stood up. He saw the chief steward holding his younger sister, Haya, and the man called out to him. Yeonshin asked about his sister's condition. The steward reported that she was safe, merely sleeping after her acupoint had been blocked. It seemed the technique was used to knock her out so the killers would not find her. Yeonshin looked at the corpses of his family and then turned to his brother. He instructed him to take Haya and raise her, advising him to go to the Jungnan sect. He explained that Haya's exceptional affinity with the 5 elements would guarantee her acceptance. His brother asked what Yeonshin would do. Yeonshin simply replied that he would look after himself. Yeonshin then called out his name, and their eyes met. He asked if she was leaving. She confirmed that she was, explaining that with the Tyrant Sword Tribe's involvement, she had to report to her sect without delay. She then asked about his plans, wondering if he would go to the desolate fortress, his mother's home. He said that he would, as he had nowhere else to go where he could grow stronger. She offered an alternative, asking him to return with her to Jungnan Mountain, an idea she strongly recommended. To persuade him, she added that she intended to recommend him as the sect leader's personal disciple. Yeonshin's demeanor changed instantly, and her assistants looked on in surprise. He asked if such a thing was even possible. She replied that for him it would be. He knew that the direct disciple of the Jungnan sect leader, one of the top 10 martial masters in the world, would be able to learn the clan's absolute sacred art. He put his hands together respectfully, stating that he would not forget her kindness but that he had to apologize and decline her offer. She sighed but then smiled, telling him not to worry. She admitted she simply wanted someone of his talent for her sect, guessing the Tyrant Sword Tribe leader had felt the same. He asked for her forgiveness again. She assured him it was fine, adding that the doors of her sect would always be open to him and that she hoped he would remember that. Seeing his chance, he became hesitant before speaking. He told her he had a question, acknowledging her great age as a member of the noble races. He asked if she knew the method to acquire the fruit of the world tree. She looked surprised. The fruit of the world tree was a heavenly treasure, protected by the leader of the desolate fortress himself, a man the emperor acknowledged as a king among his peers. It was said to grant eternal life and youth to those who ate it. Yeonshin thought that surely, if he ate such a fruit, his own fragile lifespan would increase beyond the few years he had left. Yeonshin explained that since she had not yet lived even half her own lifespan, she held no authority over the world tree. All she knew was that the leader of the desolate fortress had the ability to grant it to people. Yeonshin determined that in that case, he had no choice but to go there. She warned him it would not be an easy journey, as the fruit was a sacred item even to her own noble race. He replied that he knew of no other way, so it couldn't be helped. He concluded that his only path forward was to become the Divine Sword Squad leader and achieve great feats. She put her hands together in a gesture of respect and told him she would cheer him on from afar. With that, she turned to leave, explaining that her assistants would help clean up the manor. He paid his respects to her one last time as she departed. Morning finally came, shining down on the graves they had dug in the woods. Yeonshin thanked the 2 assistants for their help. They replied that it was for the sake of the clan, acknowledging that they had played a part in the tragedy. His brother then approached him, his face filled with regret. He admitted that an apology was not enough for everything Yeonshin had endured. He promised that when they met again, he would try to be a better older brother and hoped that Yeonshin would do his best to survive. Yeonshin's reply was blunt. He warned his brother that he was not exceptional, at least not in his eyes, and that he would have to train as if his life depended on it. His brother accepted the criticism without anger and vowed to remember his words. Yeonshin looked at his niece, Haya, and told his brother to protect her. He then turned to the chief steward and asked about his destination. The steward explained that since the direct bloodline of the clan was still alive, he would look after the clan's remaining assets, which were spread across small branches in various places. Yeonshin told the steward he hoped they could meet from time to time at the desolate fortress. Noting that the steward's knowledge of martial arts would be of help, the steward bowed deeply, addressing him as master. Yeonshin wished him a comfortable life and told him to take care of himself. The kind words surprised the steward, who wondered if anyone else in the Jung clan had ever spoken to him with such consideration. With his goodbyes said, Yeonshin turned and took his leave. The scene shifts to the bustling city of Xiangyang. Yeonshin was shown to an upstairs room at an inn. He put his bag down and looked out over the city. He murmured that he was finally there. In the distance, the imposing structure of the desolate fortress was visible. He overheard men in the next room remarking on how incredible the fortress was, and how people from all over the Central Plains gathered there with big dreams, making the innkeeper a rich man. The innkeeper complained he was completely out of liquor to sell, and another man grumbled about how chaotic the restaurant had become with all the martial artists hoping to take their entrance exams. Yeonshin wondered if there was truly an entrance exam for the fortress. A young man approached his table and asked if he was there to take part in it. The man, Hyun Won-chang, seemed fascinated to see a challenger younger than himself and introduced himself as being from a faraway city on the outskirts of Shaanxi. Yeonshin returned the introduction. Won-chang commented that Yeonshin's journey must have been easy since he came from nearby, then boasted of his own travels, which involved fighting bandits and pirates whose water-based martial arts were genuinely difficult to counter. Yeonshin recalled flashes of his own journey. A bloodied sword, bandits on the ground in fear, but his face remained placid. He took a sip of his drink and replied that his journey had, indeed, been quite easy. Won-chang looked around the inn and suggested they become friends to share any information they had about the test. Yeonshin asked what he meant by test. Won-chang seemed a little confused by the question. He explained that it was known as the Desolate Fortress Trial. Unlike usual martial arts tests, it was open to anyone, regardless of their foundation. Those who passed were provided with immense opportunities and teachings, which was why so many martial artists flocked to the city. Yeonshin set his cup down, recalling the saying that if one wished to take on the world with a single weapon, they should go to the Desolate Fortress. It was known that all the elixirs and advanced martial arts gathered from across the world were waiting inside. Won-chang dismissed the idea that the traditional great sects were better, scoffing that martial groups created by mere commoners could never be stronger than the fortress. He then explained that almost no one passed the trial on their first try, with the chances being about 1 in 1,000. Those who succeeded were usually the next generation leaders of reputable clans. This brought him to his point. He asked if Yeonshin would like to take the test with him the next day. Yeonshin agreed without hesitation. Surprised by his easygoing nature, Won-chang began to explain that the process could be confusing for a first-timer, but Yeonshin instantly tuned him out. He looked toward the fortress, a sense of relief washing over him. He was glad he could join by passing a test, as he had no desire to ask his mother's family for help, not even knowing where they lived or what they looked like. The next day, as a flag was raised high in the sky, Yeonshin and Won-chang walked toward their destination. Won-chang announced that it was time to go. Yeonshin felt a surge of excitement, ready to see what the desolate fortress held for him. Later, at the trial grounds, an official gave Yeonshin a wooden plaque bearing the number 13. Yeonshin accepted it and looked around, gauging the competition and the judges who watched from a raised platform. Won-chang explained that the first exam was simply about getting the supervisor to accept one's plaque. If the judge told a participant to return it, they had failed. The second exam, he continued, was a tournament. Yeonshin asked if there was a third, and after a moment's thought, Won-chang confirmed it was an interview with the fortress's lord. Yeonshin expressed his surprise, asking if he truly meant an interview with the lord himself. Won-chang affirmed this, explaining that many martial artists came to Xiangyang just for that singular chance. A conversation with an absolute master was an incredible opportunity, from which they hoped to receive some profound understanding. Yeonshin glanced toward the tournament grounds and said he would take note of that. One of the judges then announced the terms of the first exam. It was a test of swift sword arts, he explained, instructing each participant to demonstrate a single swing with their fastest technique, which he would personally watch and judge. Won-chang immediately volunteered to go first, and the receptionist gave him an approving nod. He admitted to Yeonshin that he had acted on a nervous impulse. To Yeonshin, the task seemed simple enough. He watched as Won-chang prepared, observing that his new friend had a well-polished spirit. He could tell Won-chang was strong, even stronger than some of the vagabonds he had encountered on his journey. Won Chong exhaled, then drew his blade in a blindingly fast horizontal swing that left a wisp of smoke hanging in the air. Some spectators murmured that this man was different, admitting they hadn't even seen the swing, only the trail of smoke it left behind. Won Chong gulped audibly, looking up at the judge and waiting for the verdict. After a moment of consideration, the judge deemed the display not bad and instructed Won Chong to hand over his plaque. A pleased Won Chong thanked the judge, then turned to Yeonshin, gave him a thumbs up, and wished him luck. Yeonshin, looking entirely unworried, walked slowly toward the platform. People in the crowd murmured in surprise at his youth, with some complimenting his courage. They wondered aloud if he was from another province, as it took immense guts to demonstrate a sword technique before a master of the desolate fortress, where even a single piece of advice was incredibly precious. Yeonshin stopped and nodded to the judge, who returned the gesture and told him he may begin. Yeonshin's eyes opened wide, and the atmosphere grew instantly tense. In the blink of an eye, his sword was already behind him, having completed its swing. As his aura dispersed, a strong gust of wind swept through the area, leaving the judge visibly impressed. Everyone else was simply confused, with people in the crowd beginning to ask when the sword had even moved. Won Chong was left speechless. The judge, momentarily lost for words, finally declared that the future of the desolate fortress was standing right there. As Yeonshin sheathed his blade, the crowd reacted with surprise at the high praise. The judge told him to hand over his plaque, looking at the number as if committing it to memory, before telling him to be on his way and calling for the next participant. Won Chong quickly followed Yeonshin, asking if he was perhaps the son of a famous family. Yeonshin asked if that would change anything, stating that he had heard that after entering the desolate fortress, all that mattered was martial talent and effort. Won Chong asked if he truly planned on passing the entire trial. Yeonshin replied that surely that was why everyone, including Won Chong, was there. Conceding the point, Won Chong bowed respectfully and, with a new, serious expression, thanked him and went on his way. Yeonshin found himself hoping that Won Chong would also pass the second exam. Back at the inn, Yeonshin meditated with the windows open. He recalled Won Chang's words that the second exam was a tournament that would take place in 3 weeks. With the exam so close, he knew the correct choice was to refine his existing skills. He would focus on his movement arts, his rapid sword techniques, and his scripture of origin. For 3 weeks, he trained relentlessly until the sun faded on the final day. A man from the fortress led Yeonshin and the other successful examinees into a waiting area, instructing them to remain there until they were called. As he opened a large door, some of the other participants commented on how his presence alone was discouraging. They had heard that the white martial arts outfit signified an elementary level. Yet the man's energy was so strong it was obvious that anyone wearing it was guaranteed a bright future. Won Chong called out to Yeonshin and asked if he had gotten taller. Yeonshin replied that Won Chong also looked much healthier. Tapping his chest, Won Chong said he had indeed accomplished something. He then advised Yeonshin that winning was not the most important thing in the upcoming exam. He explained that even just one good match in the tournament was enough to catch the eye of a watching master, though he admitted that was the hardest part. Yeonshin asked if this meant one could win a match and still fail the exam. Won Chong confirmed this was true, as the exam supervisors would have a much higher standard that day. When Yeonshin asked why, Won Chong explained he had heard that the White Qilin, from the Namgung family, was competing. Yeonshin asked if he meant the famed White Qilin, and Won Chong confirmed it. He recounted the rumors. The young man had wiped out a notorious group of bandits before he was 15, beheaded the sword master of an unorthodox faction, and defeated all the upcoming fighters at the Great Family's Dragon and Phoenix tournament when he was only 18. Yeonshin wondered what such a person could be lacking, asking why someone with such high martial prowess would need to join the fortress. Won Chong explained that because the White Qilin was the child of a concubine, he could not become his family's patriarch. He added that rising to the position of the desolate fortress's lord's captain was of a similar standing, as the fortress maintained the order of Jianghu in the Central Plains. Yeonshin gave him a look of understanding just as an examiner called his name. Won Chong looked nervous for him, but Yeonshin remained calm. He told Wen Chong he hoped to see him again inside the fortress. Surprised but encouraged, Wen Chong shouted his agreement as Yeonshin walked forward. Inside the arena, martial masters of all types were gathered to watch. Yeonshin's opponent drew his blade, but Yeonshin merely watched. The judge announced the beginning of the match. The man began to laugh, launching into a strange speech about how not knowing one's final destination was mere despair, comparing Yeonshin to a moth struggling around a flame. He was about to ask Yeonshin if he knew who he was when his question was cut short. With lightning speed, Yeonshin struck him across the face with the sheath of his blade, sending him flying. The man thudded to the ground, unconscious. Yeonshin was left simply confused that it had been so easy. 5 officials quickly dragged the unconscious man away as Yeonshin watched. The other martial artists in the waiting area hadn't seemed particularly interested in the brief fight. Then one man smiled and walked forward, asking if he could begin now. Yeonshin wondered what was happening, as this new opponent had a completely different air about him. He stood in the center of the ring, facing the newcomer under the watchful eyes of the judges, and realized that his true test was only just beginning. In the stands, some of the more knowledgeable spectators murmured that this was the real event, wondering which of the squad leaders would claim him. They commented that the newcomer was stronger than even they were, adding that they would expect no less from a member of the Namgung family. Hearing the name, Yeonshin realized this must be the famed White Qilin. The spectators buzzed with anticipation, hoping they would be able to witness the legendary Boundless Heaven technique. Yeonshin assessed his opponent. While the man looked about 5 years older and was more physically fit due to his family's superior techniques, Yeonshin felt it was not an insurmountable level. He believed he was superior in other aspects. The man put his hands together in a formal greeting, introducing himself as Namgung Yeonshin. He stated that he was trained in the Boundless Heaven technique and the Infinite Steps. He then unsheathed his blade, adding that it was nice to meet him. Yeonshin returned the gesture, stating that he was trained in the Jung movement art. Yeonshin looked confused and asked if Yeonshin was not going to draw his blade. In response, Yeonshin simply placed his hand on his sword's hilt and rotated his body, giving his opponent a glare that communicated his readiness. Yeonshin nodded in understanding and began to channel the aura into his own blade. Yeonshin readied himself, reflecting on the essence of the technique he had been practicing. His core was unpredictability, an unexpected main attack launched from an unpredictable rhythm. He hoped that if it worked, he could force his opponent to let his guard down. He waited, and the air in the arena grew tense as everyone watched in anticipation. The judge yelled for them to begin. In the next instant, a loud crack echoed through the hall as their swords collided. The top half of Yeonshin's blade shattered, sent flying across the room. He continued to glare at Yeonshin, who looked taken aback by his sheer speed. As Yeonshin's own sword fell from his grip and clattered to the ground, the crowd erupted in confusion. Many declared that Yeonshin had won with incredible speed, but others, seeing the full picture, grew nervous. Yeonshin looked down at his own blade, a look of realization dawning on him. He then pointed its tip to the ground, admitting his loss. Yeonshin was surprised, and some of the other martial masters asked Yeonshin what he meant. The men from the stands who had recognized Yeonshin earlier explained that Yeonshin's sword strike had been frighteningly fast. They noted that he was clearly younger than Yeonshin and likely could not use true energy yet, which made the feat all the more terrifying. They expressed fear at what he might become, realizing a hidden master was in their midst. The judge asked for confirmation that his name was Yeonshin. When Yeonshin said it was, the judge pointed him toward another garden to the north of the arena and told him to wait there. Yeonshin agreed and, putting his hands together, told Yeonshin he would love it if they could duel again another time. Yeonshin replied that he was about to say the same and that he looked forward to it. Yeonshin regarded him for a moment, as if he had learned something important, then quickly headed out of the building. He arrived at the garden to find other candidates already waiting. They all looked back at him, surprised that someone so young had passed, especially since they had assumed Yeonshin would be the first to advance. Yeonshin replayed the fight in his mind. He knew there would be no chance of winning if the fight dragged on, which was why he had used the most extreme form of his delightful sword technique. However, because Washin's sword was imbued with true energy, his own blade had broken. It was a failure on his part for being too rash. For Washin to admit defeat under those circumstances, he mused, must be a mark of the nobleness of a renowned family. He recalled how the others had mentioned he couldn't use true energy. He considered that the Jung clan was only a third-rate branch. If anyone in his household had known how to use such a skill, he surely would have learned it. But now, having witnessed it firsthand, he realized how it should be used. He looked down at his hand and, with this newfound understanding, began to imbue his aura into his broken sword. It was not, he now knew, simply about pushing energy into the weapon. He could use the true energy as a medium to become one with the sword itself. The broken blade began to vibrate, emitting a low hum that caused everyone in the garden to look over. They recognized the sound as sword resonation and expressed their shock that someone so young could achieve it. Pulses of aura began to emanate from the blade, synced with the resonating sound. Yeonshin identified the sensation as his sword and body becoming united. This, he realized, must be the state of body-sword unification. As the aura from his enlightenment dissipated, Yeonshin slowly opened his eyes, smiling as he looked at his broken blade. He wondered about the new techniques he would be able to use in this heightened state. Washin, who had been standing beside him, congratulated him on his achievement. Confused, Yeonshin noticed that Washin had his hand on his own blade, and that the other candidates were watching them intently. He realized Washin must have been protecting him, fearing that someone might interfere with his moment of clarity. He told Washin he hadn't been aware of his protection and thanked him, also congratulating him on passing the trial and addressing him formally as Sir Namgung. Washin was taken aback for a moment before letting out a loud, hearty laugh. Wonchong piped up from the side, reminding Yeonshin that he was there too and shouldn't be overlooked. Yeonshin congratulated him as well, and Wonchong returned the sentiment. He then asked if Yeonshin knew that he had already earned a nickname. When Yeonshin asked what he meant, Wonchong explained that when someone shows exceptional prowess or attracts significant attention, people give them a nickname. He added that unless the name was for someone who committed an atrocious deed, most nicknames were a huge honor for martial artists, just like Cliff Swordsman, Neutral Spirit Fist, and, of course, White Qilin. Washin confirmed he had heard about it too. Yeonshin was confused, thinking all he had done was take a trial. Washin revealed that they were calling him the Lightning Genius. Surprised, Yeonshin listened as Washin explained that the name was based on his lightning-fast talent. It was even more impressive, he added, that the martial artists of the Desolate Fortress were the ones calling him that, which meant it was now basically his official nickname in all of Jianghu. Yeonshin questioned if they weren't just mocking someone young who was a little fast with his sword. Washin scoffed, asking what he meant by a little fast. He pointed out that if Yeonshin's speed, which Washin himself could barely react to, was only a little fast, he wondered how slow that must make him. Yeonshin considered the new title a name he wouldn't have even dreamed of when he was practicing his horse stance back at the manor, and admitted to himself that it didn't have a bad ring to it. An official then yelled for the remaining candidates to gather, announcing that only one trial remained. If they passed it, they would officially join the fortress. Yeonshin looked up at the tall pagoda where the final test would be held, his expression determined. He was about to meet a living piece of history, one of the strongest martial masters in the world, or perhaps even the strongest. One by one, the candidates went inside, and one by one, they came out looking absolutely defeated. The first walked past them like a man in a trance, his expression completely vacant. Wonchong grew worried, noting how quickly everyone was emerging. He wondered if the leader was just glancing at their faces before dismissing them. Another candidate stumbled out, then another. Finally, Yeonshin's name was called. He turned and walked toward the door as Wonchong watched with a concerned look. Inside, he was told to keep going until he reached the top. He slowly headed up the steps, one by one, until he was greeted by a giant, ornate door. It opened automatically, and Yeonshin walked forward into a grand chamber filled with all sorts of decorations. He immediately felt a strange, powerful presence and looked up, surprised, to see a green-haired person sitting in a chair. He wondered if this was the leader said to be the strongest in the world. As he prepared to introduce himself, the person turned, revealing herself to be another elf. Yeonshin waited for her to speak, but instead of a greeting, she simply glared at him and stated that he was of that child's bloodline. He asked what she meant, wondering if she knew his mother. Her expression shifted, and she remarked that it seemed he already knew what she meant, commenting on his boldness. She took note that he didn't even tremble under her gaze. He calmly stated that he was the grandson of the former Divine Sword Squad leader. She replied that his grandfather was about to become part of the Elder Council and was a very obstinate man. Her gaze lingered on him, and she commented that he seemed to have a wound. Yeonshin dismissed it as a trivial family matter, nothing to be concerned about. She disagreed, saying that while his trained body masked it, the underlying issue remained, and he would probably live for only around 15 more years. She then nodded, agreeing that it wasn't something an outsider should comment on, and advised him to seek out his grandfather first. He apologized but stated that the authority she carried as a transcendent being of absolute strength was a separate matter from her attempt to interfere in his family's affairs. A smile touched her lips. She extended a foot and slowly rose from her chair, saying that she liked him. She found it interesting that he refused to bow down to anyone, even though he had clearly come because he wanted something. Surprised, Yeonshin wondered how she knew what he wanted. He guessed she must have discovered his abnormally wide upper meridian and decided to ask directly if the fruit of the world tree would save him. She commented that the facts he knew about the fruit weren't entirely inaccurate, and as his nervousness grew, she confirmed that yes, it was possible for him to get what he wanted. A surge of hope washed over him, and he asked if he could have it. She told him it would depend on his actions. He sighed in relief, saying that was good enough for him, and thanked her. Then, remembering he was in the middle of a trial, he asked if he was now a martial artist of the fortress. She smiled, confirmed that he had passed, and told him he could leave. As he turned, she addressed him as the next Divine Sword Squad leader. He looked back, trying to see if she was jesting, but she offered him a soft, warm smile. As he left, he wasn't sure if she was teasing him or if she genuinely saw his potential. He then reasoned that perhaps she was inferring that he could obtain the fruit of the world tree only if he became the Divine Sword Squad leader. If that was the case, he thought, then at least he now had a clear goal. A short time later, Washin, a proud-looking Wonchong, a curious Yeonshin, and one other older man, the only 4 to have passed the trial, followed an official from the desolate fortress. The official stopped and asked if they knew what kind of work the fortress truly did. Wonchong answered that its purpose was to stop the martial masters of Murim from overthrowing the imperial family. The man replied that while he was correct, that was only one of their major duties. Their primary function was something else: to prevent or suppress large-scale conflicts from happening anywhere in Jianghu. The recruits realized the scope of their duty was far greater than they had initially thought. The official continued, explaining that no one knows what might happen when a fight in Jianghu breaks out. He reminded them of the bloodstorm that swept across the Central Plains when rumors of the heavenly demon graves discovery spread. It would be one thing if the conflict was contained to those coveting martial arts manuals or elixirs, but the heinous deeds of vicious martial artists often affected everyone around them. Countless commoners lost their lives, and when they witnessed such a hellish sight, the empire became unrecognizable. Wonchang's expression turned angry and regretful as he named the event the disaster of the heavenly demon grave. The official confirmed it had been 17 years since the incident, adding that unorthodox sects and demonic factions weren't the only problems. All orthodox groups, including the 9 great sects and 8 great clans, could also become threats if left unchecked. When the people suffer, unrest grows, taxes aren't paid, and the reign of the empire is threatened. That, he explained, was why the imperial family provided the fortress with huge amounts of money, elixirs, manuals, and masters. He stopped walking and turned to them. This, he declared, was what they would be doing at the desolate fortress. They must sever the heads of any martial artist who disrupts the lives of normal people. This was the true weight they had to carry. Most of them were caught off guard by the grim reality of their mission. Yeonshin, however, remained unfazed, his expression focused. It was unclear if Yeonshin was surprised or if he had expected as much. The official cleared his throat, informing them that they would all be staying there for now and would soon be assigned to a specific squad and moved to the appropriate accommodations. He wished them all the best. 1 week later, at night, flies swarmed the lamp in Yeonshin's room. Lying on his bed while practicing his meditation, he noted that his assignment was taking longer than he expected. A knock came at the door. It was Wonchong, asking if he could enter. Yeonshin consented, and Wonchong came in, approaching him with news. He announced that their assignments had finally been decided. They were both going to the Radiant Demon Squad, a combat unit. Yeonshin found the name familiar. Wonchong asked if he had heard the rumors. When Yeonshin said no, Wonchong eagerly explained that the 17 combat squad captains under the Divine Sword Squad had apparently fought each other for the right to take in the new warriors. Yeonshin was confused, wondering why the combat squad captains, who were esteemed martial masters representing the fortress, would spar with one another over recruits. Wonchong laughed, confirming that it was true, and that the grand contest had been held specifically to recruit the White Qilin and the Lightning Genius. The next day, at the arena of the Radiant Demon Squad, Yeonshin and Wonchong stood inside, wearing their new white uniforms. Wonchong was clearly enamored with him. Some of the other squad members watched from the side. One of them, a man with an odd demeanor, commented on how cute the new recruits were. They were then introduced to the squad captain, a man named Ma Jin. Yeonshin had heard talk of him being the strongest among the 17 squad captains, and seeing him in person, he felt it was more than just a rumor. Ma Jin got right in their faces and called out to Yeonshin, addressing him as the Lightning Genius. Yeonshin affirmed his identity with a respectful "Sir." Ma Jin continued to glare at him, but Yeonshin's gaze never shifted. A smirk slowly spread across the captain's face. He commented that Yeonshin had backbone and that people like him didn't die easily. He explained that their combat squad under the larger Divine Squad was basically like one of the sects in the Central Plains. The two of them would learn martial arts in the Radiant Demon Squad, execute missions, and treat everyone there as their seniors. Wonchong raised his hand, asking if he could pose a question. Given permission, he thanked the captain and asked if learning martial arts in the squad meant that everyone shared their personal techniques. Ma Jin clarified that this was not the case. Techniques learned by oneself remained personal property. Only the martial arts of the Radiant Demon Squad would be taught there. Wonchang's face lit up with excitement at the thought of learning the famous Radiant Demon arts. Ma Jin warned him that he would need to work hard to learn them if he wanted to survive. Yeonshin remarked that he had heard of their martial arts before. He recounted the story of how their squad, famous among the 17, had fought the elite Plum Blossom swordsmen of the manhwa sect without suffering any casualties. That incident, he noted, gave even more credibility to the rumors that the desolate fortress was the strongest power in the world. Ma Jin added that while they were affiliated with the imperial family, attacks on the martial artists of the desolate fortress did not constitute treason. This, he stressed, was why they had to learn whatever they could and become stronger. Yeonshin found this illogical and asked why it wasn't considered treason. Ma Jin's expression suggested it was a fair question. He explained that Jianghu was full of eccentrics, numerous individuals who had lost their minds to demonic arts, or were so exceptionally skilled in mobility arts that they could harass government officials and then escape into the wilderness. The dignity of the imperial family wasn't applied to the fortress because their job wasn't to act like officials, but to actually fight other martial artists on their own terms. Therefore, as he kept telling them, if they did not become stronger, they would die. He then turned to another squad member, saying that the man who had been slashed by the Namgung clan's strongest swordsman while on a mission could give them a better description of that reality. The man sighed that Ma Jin must be talking about the king-style sword arts, remarking that it was an incredibly scary technique as he lifted his bandana slightly to reveal a scar. Yeonshin knew the king-style sword arts was considered one of the strongest styles of swordsmanship in the world, a supreme martial art learned only by the main descendants of the Namgung clan. He was amazed that this man had fought such a skilled master and returned alive. The veteran warrior said he would start with the lightning genius, mentioning he had heard that Yeonshin's swift sword arts were exceptional and that he wanted a better look. Understanding this was a challenge, Yeonshin walked to the center of the arena. He gripped his sword and began to release his aura, which pulsed across the ground in waves of blue lightning. The other squad members looked on with surprise, some even smiling. Ma Jin and Won Chong were also taken aback. The man simply smiled, grabbed his own blade, and unsheathed it, resting it casually on his back. He introduced himself as Jung Yeonshin, stating he was born and raised in Xiangyang. Yeonshin returned the introduction, stating that he was from Shinya County. Jung Yeonshin remarked that he couldn't believe such a place had produced a genius like him, and the two opponents locked eyes in an intense, silent stare down. Jung Yeonshin began his lesson by explaining that even a 10-year-old kid using the tri-sword technique produces a discernible wind. This wind, he elaborated, is how a fighter can discern the nature of an opponent's swing. Yeonshin wondered what he meant by that. Jung Yeonshin continued, complimenting Yeonshin for making it so far at such a young age, which signified great talent. He expressed his eagerness to see that talent demonstrated, and as he spoke, a faint heat began to emanate from his blade. He repeated his desire to witness Yeonshin's skill with the sword. Yeonshin agreed, his focus sharpening as he adjusted his grip, moving his hand closer to the top of the hilt. To the surprise of everyone watching, he once again activated sword resonance. The blue aura pulsed from the ground beneath him, and even Ma Jin looked impressed. Jung Yeonshin laughed, though it was a laugh of clear amusement rather than derision. Yeonshin told himself to focus, his vision narrowing until all he saw was white. He realized he could feel his opponent's breathing through his energy detection. He waited, listening intently to the quiet rhythm of Jung Yeonshin breathing in and out. Then his eyes snapped open. He knew the moment had come. He stomped the floor and dashed forward, his blade starting to unsheathe as he employed his swift sword arts. He swung towards Jung Yeonshin's arm, but his opponent reacted with ample time, knocking the attack aside and sending Yeonshin stumbling backward off balance. Confused, Yeonshin wondered when exactly Jung Yeonshin had even raised his blade. As he backpedaled to create distance, he reminded himself that this was a martial master who had survived an encounter with the strongest swordsman of the Namgung clan. He should have expected such skill. Keeping that in mind, he imbued his foot with aura and slammed it into the ground, launching himself back in for a second round. Jung Yeonshin swung down towards his head. Yeonshin sidestepped the blow, the blade so close it clipped a few strands of his hair. Now positioned behind Jung Yeonshin, he slammed his feet into the ground to regain his posture and swung his blade upwards in a lunging strike, which Jung Yeonshin also managed to block. Jung Yeonshin looked surprised, as if Yeonshin had performed better than he expected. Yeonshin remained laser-focused, waiting for the next move. Jung Yeonshin's body blurred and then vanished completely. Yeonshin was surprised by the speed but knew an attack was coming. He dodged forward just as a strike came in from behind him. It was only a feint. The real Jung Yeonshin was now above him, sword raised high for the follow-up. As Jung Yeonshin's swing came down, Yeonshin dodged underneath it while simultaneously raising his own blade in a counterattack. His eyes locked directly with his opponent's. Jung Yeonshin leaned his head back just in time. The attack was so close it sliced through his bandana as he performed a backflip through the air to create distance. The movement revealed his ears, which were long and pointed. He was an elf. He landed softly on the ground, and the entire room fell into an eerie silence as they stared at one another. Everyone looked surprised, not having expected such a high-level fight from someone who had just joined. Even Ma Jin was completely engrossed. Won Chong looked as if he might faint. Yeonshin readied himself for the next exchange, but he noticed Jung Yeonshin had taken a relaxed stance. He let out a sigh, thinking that such composure was to be expected of the noble race. Misinterpreting the stance as a signal to end the spar with one final, decisive attack, Yeonshin lowered his sword as well. He decided internally to use his limit-releasing technique, a skill he formerly called the origin ability. As he prepared, he realized something was strange. He looked around the room and saw everyone staring dumbfounded. Their jaws dropped. He wondered why they were making such expressions. Even Jung Yeonshin looked bewildered. Yeonshin lowered his blade completely and asked Jung Yeonshin for his honest assessment. Surprised, Jung Yeonshin asked what he meant. Yeonshin clarified that he knew Jung Yeonshin had gone easy on him, but he still requested an honest opinion. Jung Yeonshin thought for a moment, then asked how old Yeonshin was again. Annoyed, Yeonshin replied that he was 15, asking why it was so important. He argued that their enemies wouldn't go easy on him because of his age and that skills were what mattered most. He then added that since he was already fated to have a short life, there was no meaning in discussing age. Of course, Yeonshin was completely misunderstanding the situation. The other squad members were all under the same impression as Jung Yeonshin. For a 15-year-old to be so skilled was absolutely insane. They murmured that he must be some kind of mistake from the heavens. They had been to the Dragon Phoenix Summit a few times but had never seen anything remotely close to his level of talent. They doubted one could become like that even if they had learned the instinct honing arts from birth. Some of the younger members lamented that they had thought themselves the most talented in their cities, only to realize they were merely frogs in a well. Amidst the commotion, Won Chong was still frozen in shock, unable to even speak, while Ma Jin seemed to have come to some sort of conclusion. Jung Yeonshin finally laughed and sheathed his blade. Yeonshin continued to look around the room in confusion. It seemed he truly did not realize how strong he was. Behind the scene shifted to Won Chong screaming loudly while the rest of the squad laughed. Ma Jin's hand, imbued with aura, was held out before him, and Won Chong was clutching his chest, doubled over in pain. Ma Jin commented that it was commendable Won Chong was still standing instead of being laid out on the ground, and instructed him to go back and solidify what he had learned. Won Chong agreed and wobbled off. Ma Jin then looked to his side, where he spotted Yeonshin still training. He was laser-focused, seemingly undisturbed by all the commotion. Ma Jin told him that he was done for the day as well, asking if he had understood the point of the steps. Yeonshin replied that he had, stating the purpose was to think and act in a seamless manner. Ma Jin affirmed this, explaining that there is always a way for a martial artist to move, regardless of the situation. The true crux of the radiant demon arts, he said, was to move seamlessly without disrupting the path of one's attacks. Now, he continued, Yeonshin must understand the deeper meaning of that path. When Yeonshin asked what he meant by this deeper meaning, Ma Jin considered it for a moment, then decided it would be better and faster to show him. He stood in front of one of the stone lantern pillars in the training yard and told Yeonshin to look carefully. Placing his hand on the pillar, his palm began to steam with a blue aura. The energy kicked up dust from the ground beneath him, growing in intensity until it sent his hair flying up. He took a deep breath, and his entire body seemed to relax and drop slightly. Yeonshin noted this, thinking that for Ma Jin to be completely relaxed while releasing his aura was a unique feat. Ma Jin slowly raised his hand into the air. Once it was level with his face, he punched forward in a super-fast, perfectly smooth motion. The stone pillar shattered in a single, clean strike, its pieces crumbling to the floor. The squad members were impressed, remarking that it was what they expected from their leader. Won Chong, meanwhile, asked how his hand wasn't hurting. The path of attack, Ma Jin explained, was about unleashing the strongest possible strike at the perfect timing. If one followed a perfect path, the most powerful attack would be unleashed. Yeonshin deduced that this meant they needed to grasp the precise timing for unleashing their strength. Ma Jin nodded, but cautioned that he was not asking them to replicate this immediately. It was not something one could master after seeing it only once. It was a skill that took a lifetime to learn. Yeonshin questioned if that was really the case, as he thought he could probably do it right now. He walked past a stunned Ma Jin and stood before the other lantern pillar. He reasoned that the essence of core energy was the great nature, and that simply following its lead should be sufficient. Activating his body sword unification, he consciously relaxed his body, just as Ma Jin had done. He closed his eyes, took a quick breath, and then opened them. His perception of the world had shifted. He could see lines of energy all over the lantern and in the air around it, with a single bright circle glowing directly in its center. He raised his sword, still in its sheath, and thrust it forward, tapping the very core of the lantern. A small crack appeared, then immediately spiderwebbed across the entire structure until the pillar shattered completely, collapsing to the ground. He smiled, stating that he now understood the deeper meaning of the path and had learned the radiant demon arts. All he needed to do now was continue training to be able to use it in a real fight. He turned, expecting to see impressed reactions, but was met with a sea of stunned, silent faces. He commented that he had shown an unsightly side of himself, as it was his first time trying the technique. He added that he still needed to experience many real fights to use it properly, noting that normal practice wouldn't be enough to use the radiant demon arts when life and death were on the line. It was clear to everyone but him that he had no idea how extraordinary his feat was. After thanking Ma Jin for his teachings, Yeonshin waited for a response. Ma Jin, momentarily speechless, finally managed to say that it looked like he would have to rethink how to teach him from now on. Yeonshin wondered if that meant his training was about to get harder. The next day, Wonchong asked Yeonshin if he had heard that their seniors had gotten into a huge fight with the Heavenly Squad. Yeonshin looked up, asking what he meant. He recalled that the desolate fortress was strict with its rules and that fighting outside of the training grounds was a punishable offense. He asked why they had fought. Wonchong explained that it was simple. One of the Heavenly Squad members had picked a fight in a restaurant. The man had apparently said something along the lines of how Yeonshin's talent wouldn't be able to blossom within the Radiant Demon Squad. Yeonshin questioned if they had really fought over something so insignificant. Wonchong replied that Yeonshin just didn't understand Murim. This, he insisted, was its true face. Something that seemed like a small matter could provoke someone to raise their sword, and the martial world placed great value on the process of stopping that sword and winning. Yeonshin thought it was more likely they were just angry about their squad being insulted. Then another thought occurred to him. This could be an opportunity. If he wanted to get the fruit of the world tree, a treasure worshipped by the noble races, he needed to accomplish something significant. In that process, he would need help from others. While owing each other their lives was the best way to gain a martial artist's trust, making a good impression on his squad members was a good first step. He stood up, announcing that after some thought, he believed Wonchong was right. If the seniors were really fighting because of him, he couldn't let it go, and he would go pay them a visit. Surprised, Wonchong watched him walk away, thinking to himself that he knew Yeonshin was a chivalrous person who understood the code of a martial artist. Yeonshin, for his part, wondered if what he was about to do could really be considered chivalrous. He appeared at the Radiant Squad's training ground once more. The other members wondered what the newbies were doing there, as they had no lesson scheduled. They commented that it was commendable they wanted to train on their day off. Yeonshin and Wonchong both greeted Ma Jin, who asked if they had run into a problem. Yeonshin stated that he wanted to have a spar. Ma Jin said he could choose anyone from their squad. Yeonshin clarified that he didn't want to spar against his own squad. He wanted to spar against the Heavenly Squad instead. Everyone was surprised by this, even Wonchong. Ma Jin smiled, saying it seemed Yeonshin had caught wind of what happened the day before, and that there was no need to get too worked up over it. Yeonshin insisted he wasn't worked up. He just wanted to see the heavenly sword arts, which he had admired for a long time. Ma Jin could tell he was being genuine, but played along with the perceived motive, saying that it seemed he was too agitated to think clearly. He added, however, that it wasn't a bad idea, as it showed he was getting worked up on behalf of his seniors. Yeonshin declared he would like to spar to show that the Radiant Demon Arts were a great martial art, and asked for Ma Jin's permission. Of course, his true intentions were to gain fighting experience with his newfound skills, leave a good impression on his seniors, and perhaps even learn the Heavenly Squad's arts, killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Ma Jin reminded him that he had neither learned the same kind of arts as the Heavenly Squad nor fought in a battle alongside them. He warned that while it might be a spar, there was no reason for their opponents to go easy on him. Yeonshin replied that was exactly what he was hoping for, putting on an angry expression for effect. The squad members took the bait, expressing their surprise and admiration for the newbie's spirit. They commented that it was the attitude befitting a martial artist of the desolate fortress, and that they would love to see what he became when he grew up. After a moment of thought, Ma Jin said fine. He would pass the message on to the heavenly squad for him. Hi everyone. What do you think of this new series we are starting? Do you like it? Comment down below if you need part 2. And don't forget to like and subscribe.